Fancy meeting you here. Welcome back. This is the DSR channel. My name is Bruce. I play a lot of D&D. I DM a lot, and we're talking the tank role today. Our goal is to make it easier to plan a character that lives up to the fantasy of being the tank. Not because you need a tank in the party. The tank is not needed. In fact, I don't think any role in the party is necessary. That's not why we do this. Why we do this is because you want to be the tank. You've chosen that's the fantasy that you want to live with this character. And so the goal here is to help you do that. Here's the outline. 1, living the fantasy of being the tank. 2, what is the tank's job, right? You've chosen this role. You've discussed it with the other players in your party. They have chosen not to be the tank. You've chosen to be the tank. They're relying on you to be the tank. That means you got to be good at being the tank, or they can't do their jobs effectively, right? You're relying on them to do their jobs. They're relying on you to do your job as the tank. And that's teamwork, and that's going to be fun. Then 3, the taunting features that you need to be a good tank. 4, the survival features you need to be a good tank. And 5, the inhibiting movement features you need to be a good tank. And that's right next to a huge steaming bowl of foreshadowing, because those 3 things are what the tank's job is. And last, we're going to talk about some tank builds. So you look forward to that. First of all, art is great for helping you create this fantasy in your head that you want to live, right? And I think this art is a great piece to help exemplify what it means to be a tank, right? So this is from the core rulebooks for 2024. They did a great job with the art in that. I love it. And this one is very evocative of what it means to be the tank. And you can see there are 2 here. Let's say that they're in the same party. One who is, you can see they're really worried. They're afraid. This black dragon's breathing, spitting acid on them. And then the other one is clearly the tank, right? They've got armor and they've got a big shield, and they're protecting their ally, and not just using their shield to protect the ally. They're putting their body in front of the ally, right? And even better, the tank is smiling, right? The other one's worried. Your ally's worried. Oh no, this might kill me. The tank's like, not only am I going to protect you, I got you, but also I'm going to live through this because I'm the tank. They're smiling. This is what they do. This is what they're spec'd for, right? Here's another example from cinematic art, right? Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, and the character Boromir, who for a lot of the movie maybe wasn't, everybody's favorite character, but he really redeems himself at the end, right? He's just realized that after coming to his senses after trying to steal the ring from Frodo, come to his senses, realized that the ring was corrupting him. What am I doing? And then he sees Merry and Pippin, the hobbits, who are in trouble, and he's like, I need to protect them, right? I have failed at what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be a protector and a warrior, and he decides to protect them. And then he pulls out the Horn of Gondor and starts blowing it, taunting the orcs to come to him while Merry and Pippin escape. They start attacking him. They're focusing all their fire on him, and he keeps going. He takes 2 arrows to the chest, keeps on going. He's swinging a sword. He's taking orcs down, and he doesn't die until he's taken 5 arrows. And more importantly, provided a significant amount of time for Merry and Pippin to run away and hide. And they do escape. And until slightly later, they're then again captured by the orcs. But they live because of Boromir, right? There's a good chance they might have been killed in the frenzy if Boromir hadn't done that. And for context, here are the 10 roles, right, that I talked about in the first video. And we're going to zoom in on, that one, the tank role. And then here's the chart that I created where I ranked every class against every role. Again, this is only at level 4. No feats are involved because feats are important, but that brings in too many variables, and there's no way I could display what that would look like in one screen. And no subclasses for the same reason. Subclasses are important. They have a very big effect on your capabilities here, but it's just too many variables to display on one screen. So we're going to get in later into some builds and show some of that, but not yet. And then let's talk about the martial roles. We're zooming in again and considering just the martial roles, which is these 4 roles: ranged, skirmisher, frontliner, and tank. And these are usually, what it means to be a martial role is that it usually means you're fighting with physicality in some way, right? You are swinging a weapon, you're shooting a bow, you are throwing punches, right? Unarmed strikes that are punches, head kicks, headbutts, or kicks. I mean, a head kick, you might kick somebody in the head. And you're usually defending yourself with physicality, right? You're either being agile and dexterous and just dodging all the attacks, or you're wearing armor and got a shield and you're blocking the attacks, things like that, right? That's what it means to be a martial. And you can see the y-axis is the offensive power axis, the x-axis is your defensive power axis, and the tank is the lower right-hand quadrant, which means they've got probably the highest defense in the party and probably the lowest offense in the party. Not because they're not allowed to have good offense, but because as you're building your character, you have to make all these choices along the way to make yourself a good tank that you don't have anything left over to really increase your offensive power very much. The Barbarians are probably the one exception to that. That's why they're the best tank. So we'll get into that. And this is the tank's job, right? They've got to be able to do these three things or they can't call themselves a tank. You got to do all three. And what I usually see a lot of players doing is they say, I want to live the tank fantasy. I'm going to be the tank. And then all they do is build their character to have really high survivability and nothing else. And if you have really high survivability and nothing else, and you're not even a threat on the battlefield, like you're not doing a lot of damage, you're not casting spells that are having big effects, you just have really high survivability, then you're not a tank. And you're not even a frontliner. What I would call you is more like you're a tree trunk, right? Because tree trunks are extremely hard to move. You can't, it's hard to rip them out of the ground. It's hard to chop them up, hard to do anything with them, except you can just walk around it. You can just walk past it. So if you can get around that tree trunk, then it has no effect on you. And that's what these kind of characters are that I've seen players build a lot with really high survivability, very low offense, and no other features. They're just a tree trunk, which means you're useless on the battlefield. The enemies ignore you and still target your wizards and bard allies anyway. So you've got to do all three of these things, right? Number one, taunt. And that's the general word I'm using for any effect that encourages the enemies to target you. That's what you want. You want as many attacks as possible to target you. Not that you want to get hit. That's different. It's not that you want to be hit a lot, but you want to be targeted by everything, right? Because you have the best survivability. So if you're targeted, you're going to survive at best. Okay. So that's what we're going for with the taunt, right? You want them targeting you, not the wizard, right? He'll fold like a leaf, right? You want them focused on you. So taunting. Then survivability. I think that one's pretty straightforward. You need really high defenses, a lot of hit points because you're going to take more hits. And then inhibit enemy movement, right? If the enemies can just run past you, then you're not really tanking either, right? You want to be able to slow them, stop them, and keep them from moving past you, around you to get to your allies behind you, right? You're the front line. You are the core of the front line, right? So you don't want them getting past you. And all three of those are important. Let's zoom in on these three features the tank has to have. Number one, taunt. You've got to have a way to taunt. Let's talk a little bit about why that matters. Okay, so this is a combat encounter that happened to one of my parties just the other night, and it is from a published adventure, so I'm not going to give you any details. That would be a spoiler, but they just appear in this room kind of by teleportation. So they just appeared in these spots. There were these four medusas in these locations when they teleported in the room, and then combat just started right here because they were already hostile. You can see that there were two paladins, a barbarian and a warlock, decent damage, decent defenses to survive on their own. They could take a few hits. There's a barbarian who is spec'd as a tank and a frontliner, so decent damage, but also great tanking ability. And then the warlock is spec'd as a controller with a little bit of range damage. Now, the warlock is a goblin, wears no armor, only has an AC of 14. The paladins both have an AC of like 19 or 20. The barbarian has an AC of 18, and combat started. Several of the medusas went first, including before the warlock, and including that medusa that was right next to the warlock. Okay, so think about this. And DMs, hot take here, you should not metagame against your players. You should play the enemies tactically, relative to their intelligence and how they might fight, but also relative to only what they can observe from the PCs, what they look like, what they're wearing, and only what they observe them doing. So on round one, as of this point, when some of the medusas were taking their turns, the warlock hadn't taken any action yet. And the barbarian got their reckless attack going, got their rage going. Reckless attack is a nice AoE taunt. I'll get into that more later. And they had rage for damage resistance. And so now it's that medusa who's right next to the warlock's turn to go. And all things, if they were equal, the barbarian has 18 AC, wears armor, has a big weapon. The warlock has 14 AC, a little goblin, no weapon, no shield. And you can say that the monsters don't see that they have an AC of 18 and 14, but just looking at them, armored and no armor, right? And small, right? And looks squishy, right? So if the barbarian didn't have their reckless attack going as an AoE taunt, then that Medusa right next to the warlock would just attack the warlock and probably hit. They have 3 attacks. They're pretty high damage. And if that fourth one in the corner also has 3 ranged attacks, might target the warlock as well. And between the two of them, that warlock could easily go down. They only had about 60 hit points or something like that, 60, 70 hit points. They could be down in 1 round before they ever got to go. Meanwhile, the Barbarian, slightly more AC, or a little more than slightly more AC, but like 120 hit points. So even if they got hit by every one of those attacks and took all the damage, the Barbarian still wouldn't be down in 1 round from 2 Medusas attacking. But this is where Reckless comes into play. And you might be thinking, Reckless? That's not a taunting feature. It's a great taunt. It's actually the best taunt in the game because what it does is it gives, we're going to say statistically on average, a 5-point difference, right? They have advantage to attack you, but they don't have the advantage to attack your allies. And now that effectively means, and we're going to say that's roughly a 5-point difference, right? So +5 to hit you. So the Barbarian effectively lowered his own AC from 18 to 13, and the Warlock's now at 14. That was enough for these Medusas to attack the Barbarian instead of the Warlock because it just made more sense. So they did, and they didn't see that he had resistance yet, so they did attack him, and he resisted more than half the damage because their snake bite has both piercing and poison damage, so he didn't resist the poison damage, but he resisted the slashing from their claws and the piercing from the snake bite. So he resisted most of the damage. Both of them attacked. His AC was lower, and the Warlock survived. Right? I don't even think the Warlock got hit. Maybe they did get hit once, but the Warlock survived. And they may not have survived if that Barbarian weren't using Reckless Attack and taunting everything in the room, because if you can reach the Barbarian, then you have advantage to attack him, and that's effectively a taunt. Now, it's a risky taunt because what you're doing is making it easier for them to attack you instead of making it harder to attack your allies, but it's still a taunt. So pretty effective. All right, let's talk about the features that you get from your base class that can help you with taunting. So as I talked about, Barbarian has Reckless Attack. Everybody has the option of grappling, which is actually a pretty effective form of taunt. It applies a 5-point difference on average because it gives anybody that you have grappled, any creature that you have grappled, it gives them disadvantage to attack anyone but you. So that gives you the same 5-point difference, but it's the better 5-point difference because instead of the Barbarian lowering his AC from 18 to 13 to be lower than the Warlock, his effective AC to be lower than the Warlock, what you're doing is leaving your AC at 18 and effectively raising the Warlock's AC to 19, right? That's the better way to go because it's not like you want to be hit, you just want to be targeted. So that is the better way to go. But when it comes to just getting people to target you, Reckless is a great way to do that, right? Very good way to do that. And if Barbarian can do both, which they can, it's like a double taunt. If you use Reckless Attack and grapple a target, you've double taunted them. It's a 10-point swing. 10-point, they get +10, they get a +5 to attack you and a -5 to attack anyone else. That's a 10-point difference. That's a super taunt. Only Barbarians can do that. They're awesome. I guess you could fall prone and give people advantage to attack you, but that's not living the fantasy of a tank, right? The tank is like that person standing out front blocking things for their allies and smiling as they're doing it, right? Not run up and lay at their feet. That's weird, but I mean, if you're okay with it, go ahead. Then there's Compelled Duel, and I've ordered these from left to right in what I think is their level of effectiveness as a taunt. So Compelled Duel is the next one up, and I would call that like a B at best level taunt. Like Reckless Attack is an S tier taunt. Grapple is an A tier taunt. Compelled Duel, B at best. It has a bunch of restrictions. First of all, it has a saving throw, so it may not work. It takes your bonus action, so you can only try it once per round. 2, it takes some kind of spell slot, right? Or a free use of the spell casting. 3, your allies can't target it. If your ally targets that guy that you've got Compelled Duel on, it ends. If you attack anyone but that Compelled Duel target, then it ends also. And lastly, you're using Compelled Duel to encourage them to attack you, right? By effectively raising everyone else's AC. You're giving them they're giving that creature disadvantage to attack all your allies. So at least that's the nice part of it. So you're encouraging them to attack you, but now if you get hit, you got to roll a Constitution saving throw to maintain concentration on that spell. And you're not going to have a great Constitution saving throw as a Paladin at level 4. And I'm doing all this at level 4 right now just to keep it simpler, set the basics, and we'll get into, we'll go off to all the way to level 20 when we do specific builds. It's just too much to do with broad strokes. So it's B tier. It's a B tier taunt at best. I'd say a C tier taunt is the interception fighting style, right? Because you're going to punish an enemy for targeting an ally. The downside is it uses your reaction. So first off, the enemies are not going to factor it in until they observe you at least doing it once, right? Round one, when they've never seen you do it and they attack you, they don't see you doing this, and then they attack an ally. Now they see you doing an interception move. And the punishment you're doing is really just blocking the damage. So now that the next time that enemy is going to be thinking, okay, do I attack an ally and maybe do no damage because he blocks it, or do I just attack the tank? So it's a C tier taunt. And the protection fighting style is like a C minus. It's even worse. So interception you declare after your ally is hit. So you can wait, if attacks 1, 2, and 3 miss, and then attack 4 hits your ally, then you can say, I'm going to use interception and block the damage. The protection fighting style, you have to declare before the attack roll is made. So on attack number 1 against your ally, you've got to say it then. Hey, I'm going to use protection fighting style to give them disadvantage on that attack against the ally, and maybe it misses and they take no damage. But once you've used it, you get 1 reaction per round. You're not using the protection fighting style again the rest of the round. So if there's like 5 enemies and each of them is making 1 attack, then on attack number 1, you use protection fighting style, then attacks 2, 3, 4, and 5, you're not a factor, right? You have no taunt going on, and they might just ignore you. I mean, there's a good chance they'll just ignore you, right? So that's the worst of all of these options. And I wouldn't even try to say that you're a tank if that's your only way to apply a taunt. So now we're actually going to start bringing in feats. This is a list of what I would call useful feats to help you with taunting specifically. There's 2 origin feats that might apply. The Savage Attacker, which increases your damage, so that makes you a little bit of a bigger threat. And being a threat is a form of taunting, right? That's not like the Tree Trunk, right? The Tree Trunk, your damage is super low, so you're 0 threat, and you're unkillable, so they just walk around you. But if you can be a threat, now they're thinking, well, maybe I take this person out because they're doing so much damage. It's not a great form of taunt, but it's something. Tavern Brawler, same kind of thing. If you're going to be a grappler tank and grappling is your form of taunt, then Tavern Brawler is going to help you do that a little better. It gives you a little boost of damage. It also gives you a little bit of ability to shove them with your unarmed strike at the same time as doing damage. Sometimes that's applicable. All right, the general feats. Fey Touched. You might be saying, what the heck? That's not a taunting feat. Well, you can get compelled duel with it. So if you've got spell slots like the Ranger and you're trying to be a tank, then you need this because the Ranger doesn't have any better ways to taunt unless they're going to grapple, but they're actually not good grapplers either unless you go with a strength-based Ranger. So if you're going with a dexterity-based tank Ranger, then you need this. You've got to have compelled duel. So that's why you would take it. Then there's the Grappler feat, which if you're going to be a grapple tank, this is your go-to feat. You want Grappler. It enhances the threat of your grapples. It increases the chance you're going to hit with a grapple. And if you have 2 hands free, like the monk, because they can't wear a shield, then you've got 2 hands free. You can grapple twice. So that first grapple, if you land it, great, you've got them grappled, and then the grappler feat gives you advantage on the next attack, so increasing the chance even further that your second grapple is going to land, and you can be grappling that enemy with 2 grapples. And it takes an action to break each one. So unless they have 2 actions somehow, they can't break your grapple. They can't break both of your grapples. So you've got them locked down. The only way they can get away is some form of like teleport or forced movement, maybe, All right, next up is Resilient Constitution. Once again, how is that a taunt? Well, it's not a taunt. You need it to help you maintain concentration on Compelled Duel. So if you're the Paladin or Ranger trying to tank and Compelled Duel is your only form of taunt, you need to maintain concentration. You might want to be looking at this to get proficiency in the Constitution saving throws to boost that save so that you're not going to lose it as easily. And last, but most important, is Sentinel. This is most often your go-to tanking feature. If you're not going to grapple and you don't have any other form of taunt, Sentinel is a decent taunt. It's a punish for attacking your ally form, much like Interception and the Protection fighting styles, but it's better than both of those because it actually hits the enemy. So you're going to deal damage to them and punish them directly. You're going to set their movement speed to 0 for the rest of that turn so they can't go anywhere. And on top of that, you might apply a weapon mastery if you have one. And if you have Topple and hit them with Sentinel, then you're toppling them as well. So it's a triple punishment for attacking your ally. So it's a pretty good form of punishment. The downside, of course, is, once again, it uses your reaction. So you only have 1 per round, and it only has an effect on the enemies once they observe you doing it at least once. But of all the reaction-based taunt functions, this is, I would say, the best of all of them. So not a bad way to go. Just because I listed all these doesn't mean they're all equal. I would say these 2 are your go-tos. If you're a grappler tank, then you need the grappler feat. And if you're anything else, you should probably go Sentinel. Next up is the survive or survival features you get from your base class. The Barbarian, starting it off strong with Rage, cuts damage in half from bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage you're taking. That's great. They also have the unarmored defense feature, which you probably shouldn't use at this level. Just wearing armor and a shield is going to do better than unarmored defense. Then the fighter, they have a self-heal in the form of second wind, and it's actually pretty potent. That'll give them probably 29 points on average of healing. They have 3 uses of it, so it's 29 total. And that's not even using any short rest to regain it. So even without any short rest, you've got 3 of those, and you're going to heal that much. If you get a short rest, you get 1 more back. That's another 9.5 points of healing every time you take a short rest that you get back as a second wind. And you can be using a short rest, of course, to heal yourself, but that also means you've got that second wind available for the next fight. So very potent. They also get the defense fighting style, +1 to AC when you're wearing armor. That's great. They have the second highest hit point dice, and they have heavy armor training and shield training, so they get an A there. And I forgot to mention that the Barbarian has the highest hit point dice, has a D12, so they get an A on that one. And then they have medium armor and shield training, and so the Barbarian gets an A in the armor category. Then the Monk, struggling in the survivability area because their only 2 features are deflect attack, which is actually pretty potent, but it only works against 1 attack per round. And you're encouraging, as if you're going to try to be a monk tank, you're encouraging enemies to focus fire on you. They're targeting you, so you're probably going to be attacked a lot more than once per round. And you only get a deflect attack once. But when it happens, when you deflect an attack, it has a 100% chance to succeed, and it's very likely to block all of the damage from that one attack. So you're basically zeroing out 1 attack per round. If you're only being attacked once per round, great. You're fighting one big monster, and that one big monster has 1 attack. That monk is going to shine. You're the king of monk tanks, right? You're taking no damage or very little damage every round, and you've got it double grappled, assuming that they're not huge or bigger, right? So when all the stars align, you're an awesome tank. But that's not the most common scenario, so that's why I still give them a C rating, because they're going to struggle to survive. They have unarmored defense, which is their only form of AC boost. And they have the 3rd highest or 2nd lowest hit point dice, so they get a C on that, and they have no armor and shield training, and so they get a D. And in fact, even if they got training with armor and shields, it would deactivate their martial arts, which you're relying on for your grappling. So even if you could get training in armor and shields, then you don't want it because you're a grapple tank, or most likely a grapple tank. That's how I built it. We'll see later in the builds. All right, then Paladin, I give them a B because they don't have a lot of extra features here. They don't have any kind of a taunt helping them out. They do have 20 points of healing from Lay on Hands that can do for themselves as a bonus action. They have the defense fighting style. They've got the 2nd highest hit point dice. They've got training in heavy armor and shields, so they're rating pretty well there. So they're almost as good as the fighter at this point. The fighter is actually beating the Paladin because the fighter has more self-healing than the Paladin. Kind of crazy. Of course, the Paladin out of combat could be using their action to cast Cure Wounds on themselves. You just don't want to be doing that in combat, because if you spend your action healing yourself, then you are not using your action to apply a tanking effect. Maybe that'll be okay if you landed your compelled duel. Kind of depends on the situation. Then we go back down to the Ranger, who I give a C as well. They don't have any features helping them out. They don't have a bonus action self-heal. All they have is they could Cure Wounds on themselves, which is going to take their action. And so they're not using their action to attack or inhibit enemy movement or anything like that. They're just healing themselves. And they don't have Compelled Duel as a base class. So if they're not attacking, then they're not even applying any form of slow or topple or push to try to keep enemies away. So they're really struggling. They do get the defense fighting style, which is good. They've got the 2nd highest hit point dice. And then they've got training in medium armor and shields, which is good enough to get an A rating at this level for armor. Let's look at some feats that are useful for survival. All right, the 2 origin feats that come to mind are Magic Initiate Cleric. That's interesting for the Paladins and Rangers to get because they can get Healing Word that way, and now they both have a bonus action spell they can be casting to heal themselves. It's not a lot. It's probably going to be 7 or 8 points of healing on average, depending on their spellcasting ability score, but it's better than nothing. Then there's Tough, which is probably always the better choice because it just increases your total hit points by 2 per level. So at level 4, you're getting 8 more hit points. That's benefiting from healing because those hit points can be healed. You also start with those, so you don't have to do anything to start off with those 8 extra hit points. It doesn't take any action economy to have those 8 extra hit points to start off with. You just always have that. And if you can get a short rest, you can heal back up to full, start the next fight with those 8 hit points. So Tough is the best origin feat to go with. Then we have general feats, Durable. This one's actually pretty interesting because it gives you a bonus action self-heal. You can spend your hit dice and heal yourself as a bonus action. Pretty interesting. It also raises your constitution score, which you want a high constitution score as a tank. Then there's Heavy Armor Master, which is pretty interesting. It gives you have to be wearing heavy armor, so only the fighter and paladin can qualify for this. But you get damage reduction. It's only going to reduce the damage by 2, and it's only reducing the damage types of bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. But those 2 points of damage reduction do add up, and if you're encouraging enemies to target you, then you're getting focus fired. So you're going to be attacked, several times per round, maybe 4 or 5 times around. Maybe you're going to be hit 2 or 3 times. That damage reduction is applying on every hit. So you're going to be blocking 4 to 6 damage per round. It adds up. It's a decent amount. Then we have Mage Slayer, which the most important thing is contributing for you as a tank is you're going to have pretty poor intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. Now, you're not going to see those a lot at level 4, and that's based on my experience with just the published adventures, third-party published adventures, and even homebrew. You just don't see a lot of those kind of saving throws being forced upon the players at that level. It does happen once in a while. It's probably going to be wisdom. But when you fail those things, it's pretty devastating. And so you might want to consider Mage Slayer to just let you automatically succeed once per short rest against an intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throw. Medium Armor Master, this is interesting because it can boost the Barbarian and Ranger's AC by 1. That will get the Barbarian up to the 19, like a fighter or paladin, or that even gets the Ranger to a 20. And now they're beating everybody. That's the highest AC you could get at level 4 without magic items. Then the last, but not least, Shield Master. It gives you the ability to apply a topple-like effect. You're knocking enemies prone or have a chance to knock them prone when you attack them. It gives you partial evasion to survive those dexterity saving throws better, and dexterity saving throws tend to be damage. Sometimes it can be a grapple, but most often it's a damage effect. So that can reduce damage you're taking. And dexterity saving throws are as common as wisdom saving throws, which is to say you're not going to get a lot of those at level 4, but when they happen, it's when you have to make a saving throw, it's probably going to be constitution, dexterity, or wisdom. And that's going to save some damage. But these are not all rated equal, right? All of these things, if you were just talking about survival features and surviving better, Tough and Mage Slayer are the way to go. They're going to be very often applicable. They're going to be always helpful. And they're going to save you from the most devastating effects in general, right? So you want broadly applicable effects that are going to help you. And so these are the 2 best for survival. The last of the 3 critical tank features is Inhibit enemy movement. And these are the options you're going to get from these base classes up through level 4. So you've got the grapple, which everyone can do. That's just anyone who can make an unarmed strike can grapple. Then you've got the slow weapon mastery, the push weapon mastery, and the topple mastery, which everybody but the monk has access to as their base class. The barbarian, fighter, paladin, ranger all get weapon masteries from their base class. So those aren't super strong ways to inhibit movement other than grapple. Grapple locks that one creature you have grappled down to movement 0. They can't move at all. And those other 3 weapon masteries are something that will help, but they're not going to block all enemies in totality from moving past you, unless you're in a 5-foot wide corridor and you're occupying the whole corridor. Then you don't even need these features, right? Because you're just blocking the corridor and they can't move past you. But we're going to try to do the best we can with what we've got, right? So these are the options from your base classes. So some things that come to mind, some feats that come to mind, 2 origin feats. You've got the Magic Initiate Druid or Wizard. That's interesting for anybody with spell slots, so the Paladin and Ranger, so you can get the Earth Tremor spell. Earth Tremor caused a little bit of damage. That's not really why we're taking it, but it turns the area within 5 feet of you into difficult terrain more or less permanently, unless somebody spends time clearing it, and it takes a lot of time, like a minute to clear 1 5-foot square. And difficult terrain makes them spend double movement to move the same amount of movement past you. So that's a 15-foot diameter area of difficult terrain around you. And if they're trying to move past you, they've got to go through 3 spaces of it now, right? But instead of costing 15 feet of movement to move 3 spaces, it's going to cost them 30 feet of movement to move 3 spaces, which for most creatures is all of their movement. So if you throw that down and they don't have any other way, maybe you're in a 15-foot wide corridor, right? So you yourself aren't blocking the whole corridor, but with Earth Tremor, you're creating difficult terrain throughout the whole width of the corridor. Now they actually can't get past you, right? With 30 feet of movement, they're going to get to just the adjacent square behind you, which is still within your threat range, right? In certain scenarios, Earth Tremor can be a decent way of inhibiting enemy movement. It's not great. I've tried it on a tank build and it was hard to pull off, especially since in that campaign we were in primarily really open spaces. That was a homebrew campaign. The other interesting things from Magic Initiate is if you take the Druid version, you can get Thorn Whip. So sometimes enemies do get past you, and now your ally is threatened, and you can use Thorn Whip to grab that enemy, pull him back to you. Now, for a lot of builds, it's hard to make that useful because you need something like either Sentinel, right? Because they're next to you, and then on their turn, if they're going to try to move away again, now you Sentinel and try to stop them, make a Sentinel attack and stop them before they get away. Or if you're the monk and you use Thorn Whip, you can use your action to cast Thorn Whip, pull them next to you, and then you still have your bonus action, and monks have martial arts to always just be able to make one unarmed strike whenever they want as their bonus action. So you could Thorn Whip them next to you and then unarmed strike to grapple them, and now they can't get away. Or if they are a particularly difficult enemy, you can Flurry of Blows and make 2 attacks with your unarmed strike, with your bonus action to unarmed strike twice and grapple them twice, or at least have 2 chances to grapple them. But if you hit them twice, you've now got them double grappled, and as I explained before, they can't break that. It takes 2 actions to break both of those grapples. They're locked down. So that's a great combo for the monk. The other origin feat that might be interesting and useful in inhibiting enemy movement is the Tavern Brawler, which is something you might be interested in for a grapple tank, and it allows you to push when you hit with unarmed strikes. So sometimes you do want to just maybe push them away from an ally who's prone. You want to push them away and then try to grapple them. Unfortunately, that only works if you have at least more than one attack, because you can't, if you push them away, you can't also have grappled them because you just push them out of your grapple reach, unless you have reach with your grapple. So there are a few species that have reach, a 10-foot reach. So with one of those species, you could make that work. But with anyone else, the vast majority of species that have just a regular reach with their unarmed strikes, you don't want to do both of those unless you have multiple attacks. Then for general feats, we've got Crusher, kind of same thing as Tavern Brawler, but you can do it with bludgeoning weapons. So you can push an enemy 5 feet. Then you have Sentinel, which I've talked about before, and we're going to talk about it, a few times. That can completely stop an enemy's movement once per round. You get 1 reaction, you can use your Sentinel, and that'll, if you hit with it with your Sentinel opportunity attack, you're going to lock them down. They have 0 movement. They're done moving that turn, so they can't get past you at all. Slasher is another option. It's when you hit somebody and you've got a slasher feat, and you hit them with a weapon that does slashing damage, or you just deal some form of slashing damage, you can reduce their movement speed by 10. That on its own isn't enough to be very useful. But if you also hit them with a slashing weapon that has the slow weapon mastery, both of those can stack. Nothing stacks if you hit them multiple times. If you hit the same enemy multiple times with slasher, the slasher effect doesn't stack. But slasher and the slow weapon mastery stack. So if you have both of those and you hit somebody, you can reduce their movement speed by 20. And if you're a high-level fighter with a bunch of attacks and action surge, you could be hitting a bunch of enemies and reduce all of their movement by 20, which actually starts to get interesting, because a 20-foot movement speed reduction leaves them, most enemies, not all, most enemies with 10 feet of movement. And 10 feet is not enough to get past you. So given enough attacks, a fairly effective way to prevent enemies from getting past you and prevent multiple enemies from getting past you. Then you have the Weapon Master feat, which frankly only the monk would consider, because the monk is the only of these tank classes that I'm considering for this video that doesn't already get Weapon Mastery as part of the base class. So, you might consider this as a monk just so you can get some sort of push, slow, or topple effect. But like with both of the other tanking features that you need to do your job well, these are not all equal. So you only get 1 general feat at level 4 for almost all of the builds. You should be taking Sentinel, right? It's only going to work on 1 enemy, but it does completely lock down that 1 enemy. And it doesn't matter if they've got 30 feet of movement or 80, you lock them down to 0. So if you can only pick 1, which is what we got right now, you should get Sentinel. A massive eye chart! Don't stare directly into it. You might lose your eyesight. There's some pretty small fonts here, but I really wanted to get all this, I felt like, important information for how these builds came together. If you want, put a comment in there, and I'll put this table into my downloads folder so you can download it and look at it offline. But yeah, these are 5 example builds I did for each of these 5 classes. I'm not saying these are the most optimized tanking build you could possibly make for these at level 4. I'm saying these are good examples of tanking builds for each of these classes. And as I said in the first video, what we're striving for is not optimized mechanics nor optimized roleplay, but what we're going for is good enough at both. You might be better at one than the other, but you want to be at least good enough at both the roleplay and the mechanics. So we're just going for good enough. And I think these rank at good enough, except maybe the Ranger. He might not be good enough. So I might need to try harder on the next time I do a Ranger tank build. But yeah, you can see that the Barbarian still coming in A. They are the best overall tank out of all this group. They have the highest hit points. They've got 18 armor class, which puts them straight in the middle of the armor class ratings. They've got a +2 to initiative, which again puts them in the middle. They have the best taunt functionality. That's the reckless attack. They've also got Sentinel to really lock down one enemy. So they're going to have the reckless attack as an AoE taunt and Sentinel to punish one enemy who attacks an ally. So in between the two of those things, they're going to be a pretty effective taunter. They probably have the best survivability out of all of these tanks in the most frequent scenarios that you're going to face, and that's due to rage, which is cutting damage they're taking from bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing in half, which is a lot. That combined with just their high hit point number of 53 means they're going to last a long time. They also have self-healing, which is not really self-healing. That's just, I named one column self-heal just to kind of be a general concept. And those roughly 18 points of what I'd say self-healing comes from the orc species, and it's their 2 features of adrenaline rush to give yourself some temporary hit points, and then the relentless endurance, which will cut out a bunch of the damage from one attack, right? So if something was going to drop you to 0 hit points, it's very likely that it would have dropped you much more than just enough to bring you to 0, right? It might have, and you don't go negative in D&D, but if, let's say, the math would have worked out that you would have gone negative, 7 or 10, and it's going to wipe out all of that damage and set you at 1 instead. So you're going to live through that one attack. So between those two things, and your rage effectively giving you doubling of temporary hit points, I on average figured that counts as maybe 18 points of self-healing in a day. And I base it off of what's the most powerful monster you might face according to the encounter building rules in the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, which is a CR 5 monster if this is a party of 4 PCs. I had to figure out what's the average damage those monster stat blocks would do. How likely is that going to be your last hit, and how much damage would that wipe out from that last hit? And I figured it came down to about 10 points of damage is how much that relentless endurance was going to prevent. And then plus the 8 temporary hit points, 4 temporary hit points that extend to 8 with rage. So taking a few liberties with that, but that's probably the most often effect you're going to have out of those. So they're looking pretty good. And as far as movement inhibition, they've got Sentinel, they've got Reach, because I chose the Whip for one of their weapon masteries. And some of you out there might be saying, why the Whip, cousin? Because it'll hurt more, you twit. No. I love that movie, but no, they don't hurt more. The Whip actually is a 1d4 damage, so it actually hurts the least. But it has some special features that other weapons don't have that you want. So if you're looking for a one-handed melee weapon that causes the slow or has the slow weapon mastery, then you only have 3 options. And that is what we want with all these tanks who've got a shield. They all have a shield, so they've got one hand available, and they want a one-handed weapon that has the slow mastery. So you've got club, javelin, and the whip. Clubs are lame, so we don't want a club for our tank. That just isn't the fantasy. Javelin is a little more damage, and you can throw it, so that's got some upsides. Still, doesn't feel like the fantasy. The whip, though, is pretty cool, especially if you flavor it as like a chain sword, right? Or a knife on a chain. Very cool visuals with that. I think I remember some movies where that's how the big bad guy, was a weapon he had. Like he had a sword that like broke apart into these chain links, and then they were swinging that around, smashing things. Comment in the comments below if you can remember, which bad guys in movies were doing that, because I can't think of which movies it was off the top of my head. I just can see the visuals in my head. So pretty cool visual. But what the whip has is that it's got reach, which means you can be whipping people from 10 feet away, which means your sentinel attack could be going off from 10 feet away. Now, if they're 10 feet behind you, that's not good. You actually want it to go off when they're only 5 feet behind you. But sentinel, the opportunity attack, triggers if they take the disengage action. So it doesn't matter if they've moved at all. If they're 10 feet in front of you, but up against one of your frontliner allies, and they try to disengage from them and then start running past you, and their plan is to run away from that frontliner, run past you, and get to the wizard in the back. Well, as soon as they disengage from your ally, right then you can whip them, and the sentinel attack drops their movement to 0. So yeah, there's the slow effect, but you don't even care about that at this point. Sentinel drops all of their movement to 0. So now they're stuck right where they were, which is a pretty useful effect. The other reason, and you'll see this down on the Ranger, is that whip also has the finesse property. So the Ranger is going to be effective with the whip as well. So, and that's really the best bet for the Ranger, is using with the whip to slow people and having reach. So, but some nice little extras, bonuses there for the Barbarian. The other thing the Barbarian has for survival is danger sense. They've got advantage on their dexterity saving throws. They've got a +2 just from their dexterity score, and they get effectively, we'll call it on average, a +5 from the advantage, which means they have a net +7, which is better than anyone else here. That's even better than the ranger and the monk, who are between their dexterity saving throw proficiency and their high dexterity scores. They're only getting a +6. So you're still beating the ranger and monk, and you're a barbarian with proficiency in strength and constitution saving throws. So you're ahead of both of them. So all around, Barbarian is looking the best. What does the fighter have going for them? Not a lot. That's why I went with the Goliath, because the fighter doesn't have any other form of taunt other than the Sentinel feat, which they took. I took on this one. I gave them the tough to try to get their hit points up, and then they have the push, topple, and slow masteries. They get by this level 4 masteries. So I took the weapon mastery in javelin as well. So they could either be throwing javelins to slow enemies at range, or they can be using their whip in melee or with reach at 10 feet. Then they have the battle axe for topple and the warhammer for push. And then they have action surge. Action surge will help a little bit in the taunting category and makes you a bigger threat on the battlefield. And that is a factor, a small factor in getting enemies to target you. So it helps. Probably better though is just the fact that you can use action surge to make 2 attacks. And with the Goliath, you can see that for the species I chose Goliath, but the hill lineage, the hill giant lineage, which means you have a feature called Hill's Tumble, which is an automatic knock somebody prone. No saving throw, they're just prone. So you could use your whip, hit 2 people, and if the enemies are split, like bowling, you split the pins, you're like, oh, I'm in trouble. So there's an enemy over there and an enemy over there. They're 25 feet apart. There's no way you could run to both and hit them. Well, you can whip one, because if you're standing right in between, you're 10 feet away and 10 feet away. So you whip one and slow them 10 feet and then use your Hill's Tumble to knock them prone. Then they have to spend half their movement to stand up, which means if they have 30 feet of movement, then they spend 15 to stand up, and you've reduced their movement speed by 10. Now they have 5 feet left and they're going nowhere, right? They can't reach any of your allies, because if you land both attacks, you've whipped 2 and basically locked down their ability to move. You're only going to do that once in a whole day, because you're only going to be able to use Hill's Tumble twice per long rest. But when you need it, you've got it. And that's, the best I could do with the fighter. You also have battle axe for topple. So when you don't have Hill's Tumble available, or their enemies are closer together, or you're just fighting one enemy, you might want to just use your battle axe to topple them. Now, you do need to discuss this with your party, because if you have a bunch of ranged attackers, like you've got archers and warlock all planning to do a bunch of attack rolls, and that's their main form of damage, then you're hurting their ability to deal damage, because you're going to give them disadvantage to make all those attacks because you've knocked the enemy prone. So this is another good example of talk with the rest of the party so that you're not messing each other up. But if your allies are not ranged attackers and they're just doing like saving throws, cantrips that cause saving throws or spells that cause saving throws to do all their damage and all of their effects, great. It's actually better, right? And especially if you have some frontliner allies and some skirmisher allies, those guys are all trying to make melee attacks. So they want to run up and hit them anyway. So if you knock them prone, that actually gives them advantage. So you're actually giving a support effect to those allies. So it's a good thing for that group, right? So again, talk with the rest of the party. If they're all going to be frontliners and skirmishers, and nobody's making ranged attack rolls, perfect. Topple all day long. The fighter's got Sentinel, so it works the same way. And the big thing helping the fighter out for survivability, the one standout that they've got out of all these builds is they have the most self-healing in the form of Second Wind. They got 29 points. They're beating the Paladin. And if they get a short rest, they get more, right? It's another 9.5 points per short rest that they take. An ability that they can use in the middle of a fight. So you can take a short rest, be back up to full hit points, and then have a second wind available in the middle of a fight, use it to restore some hit points and extend further. So they've got good self-healing. Is it more than the damage reduction you're going to get from rage? Depends on the scenario. Some monsters, a lot more monster stat blocks do non-bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage. There's a lot of stat blocks that do, it's very common now that they're going to do one of those, I'll call it physical forms of damage, bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, and then something else, poison, necrotic, fire. That's actually pretty common now. I don't know how common I'd say. You're going to run into it. Is it going to be every fight? No. You're going to go most fights where it's just bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, but you'll probably run into that alternate form of damage once a session, once every 3 fights or something like that, right? It's going to happen. But the rage is going to help you. Like nearly every attack that any monster makes at least does partially bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, and the Barbarian is going to resist all of that. So that's cutting that in half. So the Barbarian probably still has better survivability than the Fighter. Okay, let's go down to the Monk. What's the Monk got working for them? So the Monk has the highest initiative modifier at 4. They've got the lowest hit points. That's not working for them. They've got the best movement speed, and they have that combo I mentioned before where they can Thorn Whip and then still bonus action attack to grapple. And the Monk is definitely going to be a grappler tank. And the Monk gets, because of martial arts, gets to use their dexterity score instead of their strength for their grappling, for their unarmed strikes and their grappling, which means they're going to be a pretty good grappler. There's also, what I hinted at earlier, they have the sneaky advantage since they're not holding a shield. They can't. They've got both hands free, which means they can grapple with both hands. And if you grapple one creature twice with both hands, each escape attempt, even if they succeed, only breaks one grapple. So a creature that you've got grappled twice would need 2 actions per round to break both grapples, and no monsters have 2 actions. Even legendary actions don't count as a form of escape. Although I think there are some monsters that have a legendary action to escape, and so you might have problems with that monster. But if they've got legendary actions, then they have legendary resistance, and they can just resist your grapple that way. So the grappling also has the limitation of only working against creatures that are one size larger than you or smaller, and a lot of monsters are immune to grapple. So, but when it works, the Monk is going to be a great grappler, and that grapple is a great taunt. So against 1, maybe 2, right? So it's still not as good as Reckless Attack as far as taunts go, but it's the second best taunt of any of these builds. Deflect Attack is going to be doing a lot of work for this Monk, and that's the other reason we didn't take Sentinel, and I didn't try to build a Sentinel-based tank for this Monk, is that they need to be using Deflect Attack to survive, and that takes their reaction. So you're not going to have your reaction available for Sentinel, and they desperately need that. They've got the lowest hit points, the lowest AC, and if you're trying to get people to attack you, you're going to get hit more than any of these tanks, and you've got the least number of hit points to survive it. But Deflect Attack is going to basically zero out the damage of 1 attack per round. And if you're only getting attacked once, maybe you're the king of tanking, right? That combat, you are the coolest tank ever, which would be an awesome moment, right? That'd be a lot of fun. That's going to be one of those moments that just feels great, and it's going to be maybe one of those things that you talk about, remember for years as you look back on your time playing D&D. Is that moment you tanked the ogre who has only 1 big attack per round, I think, unless they changed it. I don't think I've played an ogre since 2024 came out. I think they have 1 attack. So you're deflecting that 1 attack every round. You've got them grappled. The ogre can't go anywhere. They have disadvantage to attack anyone but you, and whenever they attack you, you just zero out the damage. It's going to be an awesome moment. And that's the best scenario for the Monk, where they're just going to shine. If you're up against 4 or 5 enemies and you're trying to tank them all, you're going to have a bad time. That's going to be rough for the Monk. You're only going to at most be able to inhibit 2 of them. You're only going to grapple 2 of them, and then you're only going to deflect 1 attack per round. So that's where they're going to be in the worst scenario. And that's probably a lot more common than facing a single monster who has 1 attack. So most of the time, you're actually not going to be a very effective tank, and you're going to die relatively easy. So they get a C. Paladin, they got a B. They have 52 hit points. It's because I made them a dwarf. They've got 20 points of self-healing, which is better than anyone else except the fighter. They've got the 19 armor class, which is good. They have the lowest initiative modifier like the fighter. They've got Sentinel for that taunting and tanking effect. They also only get 2 weapon mastery. So I went with push and slow, but if you don't have ranged attackers in your party, you could just as easily go topple and slow or topple and push. They do have compelled duel, and compelled duel is like I said, B-rated taunt. It's got all those downsides I mentioned. I'm not going to go through all of that again, but they have compelled duel and sentinel, so they're leveraging both. They've got 2 ways to kind of handle situations, plus some weapon masteries to help out. So between their defenses, their self-healing, and all of those features, I give them a B. And I would say they're probably, relative on this list, they're better off than the fighter. Like I might say the fighter is a B minus, just because their taunt capability is poor. Of all 5 of these builds, I would say the fighter has the worst taunting effects of any of them. So I would say that fighter is a B minus, and this paladin is a B. And I would say the monk is like a C plus, because the ranger is like a C minus. All right, ranger coming in at the second lowest hit points. They've got a decent armor class at 19, the highest on this list. They've got a good initiative modifier, but their only form of taunting is compelled duel plus the slow effect of their whip. That's all they have. They've got the healing word spell from Magic Initiate Druid, so they've got a bonus action heal, And unless they spend spell slots, it's only going to give them 8 points of healing. You could spend spell slots, but every spell slot you spend on healing is a spell slot you're not using on Compelled Duel, and your Compelled Duel only has a save DC of 13, so it's not going to land every time. Also, you're going to get hit because you're encouraging them to attack you, so it's going to break your Constitution saving throw to maintain concentration on that spell. If you get hit, is only a +2. So if you get hit, it's pretty likely you're going to lose it, and you're going to need to recast it. So you have to be making this trade-off between, am I going to save some spell slots to cast Compelled Duel again? And you only have 3 spell slots at this level, 3 first-level spell slots at level 4. But if you have to choose between, can I cast Compelled Duel again, and am I just going to die? You should probably use Healing Word so you don't die, because a tank who's unconscious or dead isn't tanking anything. So it doesn't matter if you have another spell slot to tank the next fight. You just need to stay alive. So anyway, you're going to have to be making those choices with only 3 spell slots to work with. So this is a C- tank build. I'm wondering if I can come up with a better build. I don't know if I could do better at level 4. Now, at higher levels, I'm sure we could do better, because then having access to more feats is going to help. That's enough of these builds. After I get through all the roles, I'll start doing specific builds where the whole video is based on a single build around a single role and a single class, and seeing how good we can do with creating the mechanics to live that fantasy of that role, and put in some flavor, how to make this character come alive and not just be a bag of mechanics for you. That's it for this video. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Boy, I have mad respect for all the YouTubers out there after doing this. This is only my second video, and it is way harder than I thought. It takes way more energy and time. So props to all of them. Yeah, if I got anything wrong or anything I missed, big things I missed, or you disagree on things, please comment. Let me know what I missed. If you're interested in getting this table, let me know in a comment, and I'll put it in the Google Drive where you can download it. And that's it. Thanks for being here. Have a good day.